Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here tonight. This is a maiden voyage for the CBO process, so we're all going to learn a lot by going through this. Let me just give you a rundown of what the meeting is going to look like, and then I'll go into the presentation. So we've had the welcome from City Manager McMullen. Everybody's had their introductions. I'm going to give a presentation on the Community Benefits Ordinance process. Then we'll have a time for distribution of applications for ad hoc committee members. And after that, then the development team will present the concept and the incentive request. And after that, we'll have time for questions and answers, and then next steps. So I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but as thorough as possible in giving the essential information from the Community Benefits Ordinance. It's a long part of the city code. I know a lot of you folks were instrumental in getting this passed and established. So thank you for your patience, and certainly if you can hold your comments till the end of the presentation, that would be great. There's a lot of information in here. I've tried to condense it as much as possible, but sometimes, just the language has to be seen as it is. And so this is going to be a range from verbatim from the ordinance and, condensed slides with bullet points, right? And what we'll go through is the purpose of the CBO. We'll go through what public support is and why we're here. I'll cover the community participation meeting, which is what we're having right now. So the requirements for that. The ordinance stipulates that certain information needs to be shared, and I'll go over that. I'll cover the details of the ad hoc committee that will need to be formed after this meeting, and what how that will be established, who the members can be, what the purpose of that is, and how staff will interact with that in the meeting structure for those, or the meeting schedule for those. From that, there will be a community benefits agreement. I'll go over the city manager and council roles, go over the minimum standards required for that document, and introduce the definitions for the different tiers that are established and what each of those require. And then go over the benefit definitions. Once that's been established, there's decisions that need to be made, and I'll go over that. And then I will give you a proposed schedule, summary schedule for this process, so you can have it all in one place to see what that looks like, and then I'll take questions. So the purpose of the CBO comes from Chapter 30 in our city code, and it's here, and I'll just read it verbatim. It shall be the policy of the city of Ypsilanti to require, wherever feasible, proportional community benefits as a condition of significant public support for development in the form of subsidies, tax abatements, below market priced land, or other enhanced public resources. And this will be known as the CBO, the Community Benefits Ordinance. So once a developer has requested public support, which is defined as financial incentive of $50,000 or more, or sale or lease of city-owned land for a price of at least $10,000 below market value, that triggers the CBO. Once that request has been made, the developer will meet with the Economic Development Department to review the request and determine what information is needed and the procedure required. And that may include, the request for plans and various other documents. So we're currently in the community participation meeting. Purpose is meeting to inform the community about the project, and the developer will be giving a presentation on that and is available for answering questions. The community will have time to discuss the potential community benefits and among yourselves, and then recommend resident members for the ad hoc committee. We didn't foresee that this was going to be a virtual meeting, so it's going to take a little bit longer with the setup we have here than it might have been for an in-person meeting. So below here are just some of the administrative responsibilities that have to happen with this meeting. Highlights being that this is subject to the Open Meetings Act, and records are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And so here, the information that needs to be shared, the scope of the request for public support, which will come up in the developer's presentation. The community benefits ordinance is Article 7 of the city code, and that link will take you to that. Specifically, section 3526 is the request for public support and goes into detail about that. We also have to share the applications for appointment to the ad hoc committee, which will come up after this presentation. So within 15 days of this meeting, the city council will establish an ad hoc committee that will consist of one interested council member appointed by council, and that is defined in the CBO as a member from the ward of the location of the proposed development, and then 5 to 8 residents of the city of Ypsilanti. The mayor, and because of the charter amendments, 2 council members can do the appointments of, with approval by the full council, can do the nominations of those members. 3 of those members should be from the recommendations that come from this meeting tonight. And the mayor and council should consider relevant community interests in appointing those other members. There's a stipulation in the CBO for residents who should be restricted, and basically that's anybody that has a bias that would impede their upholding the responsibility of being a committee member, and that may include anybody that has been affiliated with the developer. So staff roles in this process for the committee, the city manager will designate a staff liaison to the committee. City attorney's office will be available for advice and assisting on this. The staff liaison will provide all the documents to the committee within 48 hours of their selection. And then upon request for any other documents, that staff liaison will have 48 hours to provide those other documents. The ad hoc committee is charged to meet twice after establishment within 60 days. So the clock starts ticking. I'm not sure how, personally, I think it's going to take more than 2 meetings, but notice of the meetings will have to be given at least 7 days in advance, and those will be public meetings as well. The purpose of the meetings is to identify the community benefits, which will be mutually agreed upon by the developer, and then make a recommendation to city council. Within those 60 days, the committee is to deliver to the city council a community benefits agreement. Within 15 days after delivering that, the developer may deliver a response to city council. And through this whole process, extensions can be made, and they can be requested either by the committee or the developer. So once the CBA has been delivered, city manager at her sole discretion may direct employees to do one of 2 things: to review and report back to the committee concerning specific aspects of the agreement, or to review the recommended CBA and report that to city council. City council has a couple options here. A CBA is required between the city of Ypsilanti and the developer prior to council making final approval on the public support. City council may grant preliminary approval of public support subject to the execution of community benefits or agreement. There's some nuance there. So the next 2 slides are taken right out of the CBO. This is the exact language that's in there. It's a list of minimum standards. I can go through these quickly, but they're available there, and the link at the top of the page will take you directly to them. The CBA has to be legally enforceable and result in the procedures specified here. Community benefits provided reflect the scale and proportion of the public support approved. Identify specific methods with regard to monitoring compliance with the provisions of the community benefits agreement. Provide for enforcement terms of specific remedies upon breach of compliance of a party. Such remedies may include, without limitation, specific permits, liquidated damages, clawbacks or revocation or withdrawal of public support. Provisions of the community benefits agreement shall be binding upon all parties, including their agents, successors, and assigns. After approval and execution by the parties, community benefits agreements shall be recorded against the property in which a project is located and run with the land. So that means that it's with the property and not with the developer themselves. So any assigns after that will be held by the CBA. Where possible, provide means to measure, value, and assess the factors discussed in section 3513. Inclusion of local small businesses, minority-owned business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises, and other relevant business organizations in pre-bid meetings and conferences with advance notice. Compliance of the developer with the living wage or prevailing wage requirements that the city has in the code. There should be no outstanding back taxes, fines, or liens on the property. Compliance of the developer with provisions contained in Chapter 15 regarding employment discrimination, the standard protocol, and provide for cleanup and contamination on the site as required by, this is an old ordinance, but by Eagle at this point. So within that, there are two tiers of projects that will come, and the two tiers are defined here with some of the requirements, and the requirements will be defined later. But so tier 1 is defined as any project that has asked for public support in the form of financial incentives in an amount of $50,000 or more and less than $250,000. Must meet the minimum standards, which we just went through, and provide for at least 2 of 3 tier 1 community benefits, which we'll get to in a minute, and or 1 tier 2 community benefit, which we'll also get into. Tier 2 is defined as a request for public support in the amount of greater than $250,000 or in the form of sale or lease of city-owned land. That's a significant difference between the two. Again, they must meet the minimum standards that we've gone through, and tier 2 must comply with all of the tier 1 community benefits and provide for at least 2 tier community benefits. And then there's a little note here, projects may provide for direct funding to the city of Ypsilanti or other relevant stakeholders for the purpose of meeting community benefits. And I found that to be curious, but what that means is rather than there could be money instead of the benefits, and so rather than defining those, they could buy out of it. Is essentially what that means. So this is the tier 1 benefits. There's 3 of them. Again, this is the exact language from the code. Providing either on-site or off-site additional recreational activities, parks, open space, public service enhancements, or public infrastructure improvements for the city of Ypsilanti and its residents. This includes public transportation services and infrastructure. 2, incorporation of green or sustainable energy elements in the project or the promotion of such investments throughout the city of Ypsilanti. 3, unbundling of construction work into bid sizes that will allow local small business level competition without restricting the project timelines. Assistance with access to bonding, lending, insurance, access to capital, procurement, and other types of capacity related assistance where necessary and when available. And again, the compliance here is that for a tier 1 project, at least 2 of the tier 1 or 1 of the tier 2 benefits. And for tier 2, that has to meet all of these, plus the 2 from the next slide. Tier 2, I'll go through this verbatim again, work with Michigan Works, the SBDC, and other similar situated organizations to help provide training, development, and preparation for potential contractual and hiring opportunities for local small businesses, minority-owned business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises, and other relevant business organizations and chambers. Number 2, providing or supporting educational and/or mentoring activities that provide or enhance employment opportunities for local residents and youth through the Ypsilanti Community Schools, Washtenaw Community College, or other educational programs. And 3 is a creation or financial support of either on-site or off-site mixed or low-income housing units, which seems to be the case for this thing, this development. So compliance here, again, tier 1, at least 2 of the tier 1 and 1 of these. For tier 2, all of tier 1 and at least 2 of these, the 3. Okay, so then what happens? We got the ad hoc committee in place. They've come up with a CBA. What are city council's responsibilities? They will have to hold, we will have to hold a public hearing regarding the proposal of the community benefits agreement no less than 15 days prior to consideration of city council. So if we're going to entertain this at a regularly scheduled meeting, we'll have to have that public hearing at least 15 days prior to that. Council has the discretion to approve community benefits agreement that provides for 1 or more community benefits not described in the ordinance in substitution for 1 or more of the community benefits that is so described. And if exercising this discretion, is the city council shall determine under which tier the alternative community benefit should qualify, and that's relevant in terms of how the compliance looks. And in the end, city council may accept, reject, or amend a proposed community benefits agreement by resolution. And so that was a lot of information. I understand that. So where we are at this point in this process with all the timelines that were in there, the developer requested public support on November 12th. We're having this meeting right now on December 16th. It's stipulated in the ordinance that within 15 days of this meeting that the council should establish the ad hoc committee. Excuse me. That runs into some interesting problems because that would be December 31st. And the language in the ordinance does state days and not business days. And, with that, we're not able to have this figured out and it would put too much of a crunch on both council and the community to have this at our next meeting, which is next Tuesday. So what I've got here is a proposed timeline for that, for the following steps of this process. We have a regularly scheduled council meeting on January 11th, in which we could establish the ad hoc committee that gives time for people to fill out the applications and get the word out and recruit people. 2 days after that, once that's established, it's 48 hours for the staff liaison to provide the documentation. So that would be January 13th. And then with this schedule, the ad hoc committee would have to have met twice by March 14th and would have to have the CBA by that time. March 29th would be the deadline for the developer to deliver the response. And again, extensions are possible for this provided in the ordinance itself. That is the extent of the unambiguous dates in the ordinance. The city manager may review and remit to the committee for clarification or to council for approval, and there's no timeline set in the ordinance for that. And city council, there's no timeline for city council deliberations. The only stipulation there is that when city council takes this up, that there would have had to been a hearing before that. And so not sure what was going on when this was adopted, but we can look at these as loopholes and agree that nobody wants to drag this out any longer than we have to. And so with that, we'll take any questions. This link is to a landing page for the Economic Development Department that gives details on this, and there will be updates to this website as the project progresses. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions you may have.
Steve, you're still sharing your screen.
Oops.
If anyone has any questions on this process, please raise your hand using the raise hand function. If no one does, we will move on to the next part of the agenda, which I'm going to share my screen. It's how do you apply to be on the committee? So there's two different ways that you can apply. One of which is people only in this meeting right now. When this ordinance was set up, we had assumed that we would just be handing out paper applications at these meetings, but with that not being the case, we have created a link. This link will be live until midnight tonight. And then, so that'll give you all here enough time to hopefully to fill out that application. And from there, that's how we will determine who will be on. Desiree, do you have any, Desiree said you have questions, so.
Yes. Hi. So I have a question about this piece because based on my understanding of the ordinance, it's not just people at this meeting that are able to apply.
So three of the people at this meeting must be selected by council. The rest of the committee, it can be chosen by council as well. So there will be two different rounds of applications. One is the people at this meeting, and one for the people who are not here that can still apply. But we want to have two separate applications because there's two separate things.
So the language in the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Desiree.
I think. Steve, you're good.
Okay. The language in the ordinance states that there will be three that come from recommendations from this meeting, but there are other people that are not in attendance here. But I didn't take that to mean that they had to fill out the application right now. But that could also be third-party recommendation for that. So if somebody's not here and they were recommended, that would also fit that.
Janice.
Okay, so my question, I just need clarification on a couple of things. One, how many people, I'm trying to understand how many people actually sit on the committee. And it looks like of that, whatever that total number is, they have to be residents of the city of Ypsilanti. And then is there are there any members on the committee that may not be a resident of the city of Ypsilanti?
This is limited to residents.
Okay.
There will be one council member. There will be up to 8 residents. It could be between 5 and 8 residents. So 3 of them will come from this, and the balance can come from people that are not recommended at this meeting. But they have to be residents of the city to be on the committee.
Amber follows.
Hi, yeah, I'm just reviewing the ordinance language, and maybe someone had already covered it, so I'm just confirming if that's been covered. Just that, yeah, it can be 3 members of attendees at this meeting or nominations of other people in the community. So yeah, I think that's what Councilmember Wilcoxon was saying, and that's what I'm seeing in this information.
So for you to apply, who are here, go to cityofypsilanti.com/CBO. Try to make it as easy as possible. That'll take you directly to I hope everyone can see my screen, CBO resume to fill out. It's very, very similar to our board and commission resume. So this is where it will take you. Anthony Cornish.
Hi, I'm not sure how much wiggle room there is on this, but I live literally across the street. I'm at 830 West Clark, and I live in Superior Township. And like, as a resident whose property value and everything else that goes along with living across the street from a new development like this, like, I don't know what kind of, input we might be able to have as far as exceptions by city council, as far as being on the committee.
Right, so the ordinance does stipulate residents, and the way I think about this is an ask for essentially money from the city. And so having people from outside the city making determinations on that, I mean, while it has to go through council and all that, I think the intent here was that people within the city who will have some financial ramifications of this, and as you said, you will as well, but I think the intent here was that this should be with residents. These meetings will be open, and you can certainly speak at those. So as far as I can see from reading this ordinance, it's still going to be just residents on the committee. Likewise, there's developments proposed in Superior Township that will be confined only to input from folks there too.
Ryan, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I don't want to belabor the point regarding nominations from this meeting, but just looking at the online form that you were showing, Mr. Myers, like that was a form for people to nominate themselves. But just want to clarify that we should have the ability to nominate other people, and when we're in the online environment, like there should be some avenue to do that.
So there will. So this is the form for people at this meeting right now. There will be an avenue for other nominations after tonight. And so there definitely will be, we want to get many of applications so we can fill up the committee. So it's definitely, there will be a second form similar to this, but it will be live after tonight's meeting. So there's no other questions.
I'd just like to delineate the difference between the recommendations and the nominations. The nominations is a formal process that council will go through, and the recommendations here. And I think with the recommendations later in this meeting, if there's somebody not present that folks think would be a good addition, then certainly bring that up here tonight so that we can get that name in the notes and then know where we're looking.
Well, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle Brazer from Lincoln Avenue Capital. Kyle, would you like Mick and Scott both to be presenters? Is that?
They can be. I'm going to share my screen, Joe, but
Okay.
might as well if you can make them presenters,
Yep.
just in case there's something supplemental to have them pull up. So, okay, well, good. Well, thank you everybody for your time this evening and your interest in this development. I'm going to share my screen here. And you should see this shortly. My name is Kyle Brazer. I'm a developer with Lincoln Avenue Capital, and I am the individual behind the application that's in front of you tonight. And just like I think everybody here, this is my first time through the city of Ypsilanti's public benefits process. So I think we'll all hopefully be able to learn this together. I've already heard several pieces of new information myself this evening, so kind of learning along the way as we go. But as we get started, I thought it'd be helpful to first provide some background on myself, my company, and the proposal that's before you this evening. So as mentioned, my name is Kyle Brazer. I'm a developer with Lincoln Avenue Capital. I also do have with me Scott England and Mick Stoddard of DJR Architecture. They are the project architects and designers. And Ted Rosenboom, who is a local attorney who specializes in land use and development and public ordinance processes like this. So those individuals are with me as well this evening on the call. Lincoln Avenue Capital, my company, is a mission-driven affordable housing development company. We are long-term owners and investors in the communities in which we build, and we take pride in being long-term community participants. I'm personally located in Minneapolis, and for the company, I work on projects in a portion of the upper Midwest, which includes Michigan. As an organization, we are dedicated to developing high-quality, affordable housing developments, creating long-term value for our residents and our communities, and working closely and collaboratively with those communities. I have been engaged with the City of Ypsilanti Planning and Economic Development Department now for several months, since probably August, at which time I had put the site under purchase contract and have been working with them on a site plan review process, which is, tonight we're talking about a financial request. We also have a planning and land use request that's going through the city somewhat simultaneously, and recently submitted an application through city planning staff, which hopefully will go in front of Planning Commission in January. So that's a land use planning process, and then this public benefits process is happening at somewhat the same time, but it's a little bit of a different track. Excuse me, try to advance my screen here. I think now is a good time to talk a little bit about just some general parameters of the development proposal. We really have two developments that are neighbors, that will be neighbors on this development site. The first is a 156 affordable family unit development, which will consist of 5 3-story residential buildings and a single-story clubhouse. The development will be surface parked, and it will have multiple amenities, including outdoor play area for children, a pool, gathering spaces outdoors, as well as indoor club room, fitness, and other things. Joe, I just want to stop for a second because I did see a hand raised. It was my thought that I would give kind of a presentation and then go to Q&A. Is that work for people? I don't want to ignore any questions, but let's,
after this will be Q&A, and we'll go over the kind of the flow of that, because it's a little bit different than our typical city council meeting, things like that. So
okay.
There will be time for questions right after. From you, it goes right into questions.
Yep, great. Okay. So then the second development consists of 152 affordable independent senior units. And for purposes of this, the senior designation simply means that it's an age-restricted building for people who are 55 years of age or older. It's considered independent living, so it's not like assisted living or any kind of memory care or services like that. It's an active adult type of senior development. The building itself is different. It's a single 3-story building with a mix of underground and surface parking. It has similar amenities to the family building, is a pool. It has some pickleball courts outside, an indoor community room, club room spaces, leasing offices, and a fitness center. I'd like to show you the site plan now because I think it helps articulate some of what we talked about. First, I'll just start with a location map. If there's anybody who's not familiar with where this parcel, the site is located, I have kind of a zoomed in section of a portion of the city of Ypsilanti, and then also Superior Township is to the north, as was mentioned earlier. Clark Road runs east-west here, LaForge north-south. That's the major intersection closest to the development site. And then the site is this kind of strangely shaped yellow box here on the screen. Immediately surrounding it are several other older apartment communities, 2 and 3 stories typically. And then you've got the Huron River, which the site actually, part of the site abuts the Huron River, although it's much higher in elevation. It's basically a kind of a bluff here, if you will. It's at least 30 feet above the river. So the real interaction the site has with the river is just seeing it. The apartment buildings and stuff are not down near the river. And then directly across the river is Eastern Michigan University, and the College Heights neighborhood is just kind of off the screen here. So that gives you some locational context for where the development sits. And then this next slide here is our actual site plan. The site plan, as I mentioned, consists of these 2 adjacent developments. The first, so Clark Road is at the top of the screen, and north is up here. So north is top of the page. The easternmost development is the senior 3-story building, kind of this truncated H shape. It consists, as I mentioned, of 152 units. It's predominantly 1 and 2 bedroom units. On a later slide, I'll show you the specific unit mix. A lot of the community amenities are contained right within kind of the entry. So you come into the building here in the front entrance, and you've got your club room and your leasing area and your offices and your fitness room and things like that. And then on the outside, we've got a pool and pickleball courts and gathering spaces and things like that. Something else worth noting on both sites, but I'll start here on the senior site, is this green dashed area demarks a stormwater retention pond that we're planning to construct. So we've engaged our civil engineers to design how stormwater will run on the site. And generally speaking, the northern part towards Clark Road is higher. And then the grade slowly slopes down as you go to the south and generally towards the river. So stormwater will flow that direction. So we've created some detention ponds to help contain the stormwater on the site. Also, there's surface parking on both sides of this development. And then the underground parking, garage parking that I mentioned is underneath the footprint of the building, accessed on either side of kind of the longer ends of the H. We are proposing a connection in between the site where Green Road currently is. And I'm going to go back to the map for just a quick second. Green Road runs off of LaForge here and then runs past these Arbor 1 apartments and the park at River Woods. And then it just dead ends right here, just kind of stops in where the parcel ends. And so we're proposing to connect Green Road all the way through to West Clark Road and complete a connection there. And then the western portion of the site contains the family development. The family development has 5 individual 3-story walk-up buildings. The site is surface parked. And it contains a 1-story clubhouse building that's got all of the common indoor amenities, including the fitness center and leasing lobby, club room, things like that. And there's a pool there as well. And then there's an outdoor playground. Because this is a family site, there will be children. And so we want to make sure that they have a dedicated outdoor play space on the site. The family site is predominantly 2 and 3 bedroom units. So it's larger units than the senior, again, accounting for those family populations. And one other thing I'll mention is that the site kind of has a mix of intentional landscaping, like the street trees along Clark Road that will be intentionally landscaped, trees closer to the building, and the landscaping plan will be further developed. But so it's got some intentional landscaping, but then it also we are attempting to preserve as much of our boundary and perimeter tree cover that already exists as we can. 1, for privacy, and 2, for just preservation of the existing trees that are able to be preserved and that are of a high quality. So that's what this is intended to kind of represent around the perimeters. These are not actual trees that have been surveyed that are being shown, but it's just supposed to be representative of that at this point. And then a couple of aerial renderings kind of looking. So Clark Road is on this portion. This is Clark Road right here. So we're from the north looking towards the river and Eastern Michigan University here. These are the adjacent surrounding apartment communities. This is the senior building and the family buildings over here. And then another aerial that's a little bit more oriented towards seeing the family site, but again, the same general aerial image of the proposed development and its surrounding context. I mentioned earlier the general unit mix. I want to talk a little bit about more about those details and also the proposed affordability. So as I mentioned, the entire development, so it's considered 100% affordable. It's all restricted to income levels and rent levels that are determined at the county level. That's how affordable housing rents and incomes are determined. The majority of the units for both the family and the senior developments will be affordable at 60% of the area median income. And that's 90% of the units are proposed to be affordable at 60% of the area median income. And then 10% are proposed to be affordable at 40% of the area median income. So what these tables do is shows, how many units of each unit type are at each level and what the corresponding rents are for each unit type. And again, going to just kind of the overall unit mix here, the family development has, 18 one bedrooms, 78 twos, and 63. So it's a much larger unit profile. And then the senior development, which typically has smaller household sizes, is 88 one bedrooms, 52 two bedrooms, and 12 three bedrooms. We like to include a few larger 3-bedroom units, even in the senior developments, because there are often residents who would like an additional bedroom. So that's kind of the overall quick breakdown on the unit mix and the affordability. So the next slide is what we're all here about tonight. So we are requesting what's called a pilot, or a payment in lieu of taxes is what that acronym stands for. And this was outlined on the city's website, and I can pull over to a memo here in a minute that outlines the pilot a little bit more. But effectively, what we're asking for here is to make a reduced property tax payment, or a payment that compensates for property taxes, because an affordable development like this, in order to finance and get the loan necessary to build the buildings, we can't pay the full amount of property taxes and not have a large financing gap. So it kind of goes into the next bullet point here, which is about subsidies required for affordable housing. So creating affordable housing requires subsidies. You have building is one scenario, but you have essentially fixed costs. Lumber costs the same no matter if you're building market rate or affordable. Excavating the site, digging out soils, your materials all cost the same no matter what you're building. Yet you're building a development that has a cap on the rents, and so therefore the cap on the income side. So if it was unrestricted, we could raise rents to a level to achieve a loan necessary to build it. Because of the capped rents, we aren't able to do that, and so subsidies are necessary. The most common subsidy in affordable housing is called the Federal Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. That's a federal resource that's allocated at the state level. So the state of Michigan has a housing authority. It's abbreviated MISHDA, Michigan State Housing Development Authority. They allocate a low-income housing tax credit for a project like this. And so that is one subsidy that we apply for, but there is still typically an additional gap that results when trying to close the financing on a project like this. And so that's where favorable tax treatments, such as a pilot or sometimes tax increment financing, is something else that's proposed. That's where those come in. And so that's where our pilot request of 5% of shelter rents will come in. The pilot will allow us to achieve the necessary loan to build the buildings that I just described to you. And then on the public benefits side, I want to just touch briefly on the public benefits. I heard some new things tonight that I wasn't aware of about very specific criteria that the development needs to achieve, the tier 2 and the tier 1. And I would actually like to review those. We will achieve several of those, but it'd be good to review that in more detail. And I think I'd like to clarify at some point. I think it's my understanding that gets determined over the course of the community benefits ordinance process, not necessarily just tonight. But some public benefits I'd like to touch on quickly are that we're creating over 300 units of affordable housing, and affordable housing is needed at all levels and all types across the country. So that's a huge public benefit of this development. And then another thing that's not outlined in the tier 1 and tier 2, but can't go without mentioning, is that developments like this have a large amount of local economic activity that they generate. Everything from new income brought in by residents that are now living on this site, income for local businesses, income from new jobs. You have suddenly 300 plus households that are now living and frequenting, businesses in the area, and adding to income and things like that. You also have a large creation of jobs, both on the construction side, so on the very front end of the development, but also that recur as a ripple effect of the economic activity that comes from this. And then local government revenue. is generated by these developments as well. Taxes, property taxes are a big one, although we are talking about a favorable treatment that would reduce the amount of property tax this development would pay. It will still pay substantially more than the current state of vacant land pays. I mean, the development as it operates, even under a pilot, will pay substantially more than that. It also will generate fees for local government, and then revenue from government-owned enterprises. There are a lot of details that we could get into, and that I look forward to getting into with this group, but I wanted to, first and foremost, provide a relatively high-level overview, and then get into more details as part of our Q&A. So I'm at the point now in my presentation where I'm happy to open it up to a discussion. Joe, I think you have an idea of how to lead that or how to run that. So I'll pass it over.
Yeah, so the goal of tonight is to hear from as many people as we can. So we're not going to have the same, you give your whole answer and response, but we also don't want to have one or two people kind of dictate how the conversation goes. And so I would say we'll give everyone maximum 5 minutes to kind of talk. We'll allow one quick rebuttal. But the goal is to get it through as many people as possible. And then when everyone has given their opinion, then we will allow for one more time for people to talk again. And then from there, we'll see where we're at. So the first person to raise their hand would be Kate Levin. So Kate, I'm going to allow you to talk now and ask your question.
Okay, I had a couple things that I wanted to ask about. One is with climate change and the increase in these deluges of rain. We really need to change the standards for the how much water stays on the property, and the current Washtenaw Water Resources Council requires new development have, I think it's 90% of all stormwater be retained on the property. And I don't know if this development is covered by that, but is it going to be up to that standard? So that's one question. And will it be done in a way that is up to the standards of having a bioretention basin, not just kind of a pit? My other comment really is that this does not seem affordable to me for Ypsilanti and Ypsilanti incomes. And I don't understand why, just because it might be what is usually done, the median income for Washtenaw County is used. It seems to me that the average income for the city of Ypsilanti should be used to determine what is affordable.
Okay, thank you, Kate. I'll start with your first question, which was about stormwater. I'm going to go. You should still be able to see my screen. So it's kind of a complicated answer on stormwater. What I can tell you is we're currently going through a preliminary engineering review with the city. So the city has its own specific stormwater requirements. I believe they pull in a lot of what Washtenaw County requires. Though I'm not a civil engineer and I don't know all those specific requirements myself. What I do know is we are sizing appropriate detention ponds. And then also there's going to be a tank underneath a portion of this parking lot that will collect additional stormwater and do a controlled release there as well. So the engineering does take into account and calculate the stormwater runoff per the engineering requirements, and we are working on engineering that actively right now. Regarding affordability, I do understand your concern, and one of the things that I've tried to do here is reduce some of so we do have those units that are at 40% of the area median income. It's a tricky balance between the true cost of building housing, which is incredibly high and only getting higher, and then still having to be limited in what we can charge for rent. And so there isn't a perfect answer in how to kind of thread that affordability needle, but am doing what I can to make these units, as affordable as possible. And as far as using the county's median income versus another local designation, that's, I guess I'm presenting what the program uses to determine what those affordability levels are. And that is done at the county level.
Thank you. Anthony Cornish, you are next to speak.
Hi, I'm curious as to, assuming there's no crazy red tape and there's no, things that get in the way of this project coming to completion, what kind of timeline are you talking about as far as when it's going to start, how long it's going to take? I'm the resident that's directly across the street from the senior area. Like, am I going to be living with noise 24/7 for 2 years, or what's the, and there's no paved road here right now. So am I going to be out of luck, or what's the situation with that?
So to start with the paved road comment, just real quick, as part of this development, we'll be paving Clark Road. So Clark Road will get finished at least down to the end of the family development. So there will be road improvements that are done. The schedule is somewhat based on our purchase agreement, our agreement to buy the property. We are hoping to start late summer, I would say August timeline. And the senior building, both buildings, if they started at exactly the same time, which at this point, we're still working out some of those specifics. I'd like to start them as close together as possible. Both developments will take about 16 months to complete. And what I can tell you is we're working with a general contractor who is well-versed in this type of building. Construction is, it's never fun when it's in your area. I mean, there's no way around it. I can't try to convince you that it'll be, no impact or anything like that, but we will be sensitive to the surroundings, and the contractor is good at working on, staging and processing and sequencing so that there's as minimal impact as possible, and so that we can finish it as quickly as possible as well.
Just to add to that, Kyle, the city does have also noise ordinances stating that you can't begin work before 7 a.m. and I think it's sunset or 9 p.m. whatever is sooner, and so it's not loud noise all the time.
Thanks, John.
The next is Councilwoman Annie Somerville.
Thank you. I just was curious for some just more detail on how the 5% pilot would work. Yeah, can you just explain that more?
Yes. Joe, is that something that you'd like me to take a crack at, or is that something that you should explain? Who?
I mean, I can explain how I'll do it, and then please chime in, Kyle.
Okay.
The city has a number of pilots. I believe we have 6 currently for our affordable housing projects. Think Park Ridge, some of the scattered sites throughout the city, Chittister Place, and Town Center are the ones that are coming directly to my mind. And instead of paying taxes, you pay a percentage of the shelter rents, which is rents minus utilities. And that's a percentage based on the calculation of number of units, rents minus utilities, and then percentage then goes just directly to the city. And so it's done via ordinance, and then the city does collect all of that revenue. Does that make sense, Councilwoman?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. I have one other question. With the breakdown of the units at 60% AMI to 40% AMI, the AMI selected is based off of what MISHDA allows. Is that correct?
It's actually, it's technically based, I think, off what the IRS allows, but then each state agency like MISHDA for Michigan publishes those rent limits as well.
Okay, and then just in terms of like the percentage chosen at the 40% AMI. Can you kind of explain why you got there?
Yeah, so, well, for starters, again, we're kind of fighting the balance between what we actually need to be able to collect and rent to be able to build something like this. And then we also have to achieve some point scoring through MISTA. So MISTA awards points for multiple different things. And one thing that they award some points for is having some additional affordability. So I worked to be able to provide 10%. Typically in a project like this, I might do 10% at 50% of the AMI. And I was able to try to do 10% at 40 here, which is a little bit lower AMI, a little bit more affordability. It's really a balancing game between the AMI rent levels chosen and what we're able to then finance for our loan.
All right, if you don't have any other questions, Councilwoman?
I mean, I guess I'm not like satisfied, but has there been thought about making this more dense so that with the 10% at 40% AMI is actually greater? Because looking at that number breakdown, it's not really, to me, worth it.
Based on kind of our planning metrics right now, we're at about the density that we can achieve with, surface lot coverage and things like that. I suppose that there could be ways to look at additional density. What I'm talking about and kind of proposing this evening is based on the development that we have in front of us, what we're requesting to make that development feasible. There are other scenarios that I think could be looked at, but as far as additional density, it feels like we're at kind of the upper threshold here. And I would welcome input from, city planning staff on that as well, because we've worked with them and taken some guidance from them. And there are a lot of restrictions on, lot area coverage and amount of pervious versus impervious surfaces and things like that. If we went a lot denser, we might be running up against some additional complications there.
Okay, and then my last question is, wouldn't you get more points from MISTA if you increase the number of the 40% AMI units?
We get more points from MISTA, we would, but then we would create more of a gap so that you have the lower overall income to the apartment then means that your loan gets smaller. So that's the hurdle. That's the balancing act. If suddenly it was 50% at 40%, the project wouldn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting that, but like if it was 20% at 40%, what would that do?
20% at 40% I would have to change my pilot request from a 5% pilot to something. I don't have that all in front of me, but I could tell you it would result in a larger pilot request.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next up is Desiree Simmons. Desiree.
Hello, good evening again. So thanks for that presentation, Kyle.
Sure.
I just want to say, right, like what you're proposing looks really nice. Like, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I want to go and play up in that pool. So it looks really great. It just makes me question and wonder like why we can't have nice things for ourselves too. I think about, I think too, what I want to name before, so I don't forget, is that in the ordinance, it says low income housing, which is, so it doesn't necessarily name affordable housing. And so I think too that it gives us room to think about like what that would mean here. That's different than the HUD definitions. And so I think that that's something that, just so we can open that up and think about what that might be. Based on the, what is this? This is just because I want to make sure I'm saying things correctly. So the American Community Survey income numbers. So based on that, the 39,332. So just thinking about that 30% cost burden on there. And I'm gonna just let everyone know, I'm not a math major, so check the math, get some more specific numbers, do what you need to do. But so, you know, but just like when I thought about, so thinking about like 30% of that, and then I divided that by 12 to think like, this is what, you know, somebody should have to spend to not be, you know, at that cost burden amount, which I always like to say that just cost burden, like if you're actually living at that space, like to understand what that feels like, that's not like where you want to be, right? But even with that, that's $983.30, right, to go to housing costs, which within that includes utilities. So utilities are included in that, which for this pilot, right, is not including utilities, right? And so anyway, so just recognizing like that difference, that differential, which I know in the information that was shared with the public, it said it was like a bit of a difference, which, you know, I personally like have a strong reaction to, because a bit would make it seem like, you know, like my daughter, she's turning 5 in February. So she could say like she's almost 5, like, and she's just a little bit further, like that's close. But it's not like it was like July. In July, she wasn't almost 5, right? Like just to understand like those differentials matter. And so I just want to say that like that's a pretty big difference when you look at that. Like I'm trying to break it down to understand, right? And then I always say this, you know, because I moved here, I'll say, right, I moved here from Boston. And so I understand what it means to be on like waterfront property. And so even though like the river, as you showed it, is like, oh, it's kind of at that place, like that's still a riverfront property. You know, some of those family units are like really close, and a lot of those amenities are still there, and it still will be, I'm sure, within the marketing, because that's my background is marketing. I'm sure within the marketing, it will be saying it's a riverfront property. And so I think that that's important for us to keep in mind. I co-own my house with a bank, right? And my mortgage is like $800 something. Okay. And that's for a family of 3 people. My income is more than the median for the city of Ypsilanti, and yet I would not be able to afford this housing. And so what that means to me is that the people who already live here will be subsidizing housing for people who will be moving here from somewhere else, whose income will be more than our income. Like their income will necessarily have to be more than our income in order to afford that, but we will be paying that bill. So I just like want you to understand, like, I'm just trying to break it down for everyone, like what this means in like dollars and cents. And then the question I have, which is not so much a comment, is the split. So when thinking about the splits between the 2 developments of the 60 to the 40% AMI, how is that split between the 2? Like, is it mainly in the senior development location or not? So yes, I think those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. To answer the question on the split, it's a proportionate split of each unit type and each development. So if there are 21 bedrooms in the family development, 10%, 2 of them are at 40 and the other 18 are at 60. It's proportionate among the unit sizes, and it's proportionate among between the 2 developments too. It's not like leaning towards one more than the other. It's just an equal share.
All right, next we have Brian Geringer. Brian.
Hey. How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I definitely want to echo a lot of what Desiree said, but she said it Great, so I'll leave it there. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the pilot program, and maybe just to quickly clarify that when it is stated as 5%, does that mean that basically in lieu of taxes, it is 5% of the rent minus utilities that is going to the city?
Correct.
Cool. I appreciate that clarification. And I think actually my only other question is for you, Mr. Brasser, like as the developers, would you be willing to share with the public your sort of financial breakdown of expected profits from this site over time, and maybe as a comparison with were the pilot not granted? And so, and especially with the ad hoc committee, so that we can sort of see firsthand how it breaks down for you and how it breaks down for us.
I think we definitely should show numbers when we get further in the process. Just to explain though, on the pilot, if for example, the pilot's not granted, there doesn't end up being a project because it's not financially feasible. So it's more of a question of project or no project, because we can't finance it without the pilot.
And Brian, just to add to that, the financials can be requested by the CBO committee. And so it's definitely something that is part of that process. Next up, we have Amber Fellows. Amber, I will allow you to unmute.
Hi, yeah. So yeah, I'm appreciating this discussion so far. I just want to go back to the CBO process though, because I didn't mention it before, but I was also a part of the group called Ready that worked with the city to put together this legislation to create the community benefits ordinance. So I'm intimately familiar with it. And I think this meeting is kind of going awry. It's kind of feeling like a normal council and development meeting for the public, so we can ask the developer questions. But the purpose of this meeting was to have like a community town hall so that we can engage and talk amongst ourselves and figure out what benefits people are looking for, and also identify who might be good to represent the ad hoc committee. I will read verbatim from the process. There shall be time at this meeting for those present to ask questions, discuss and identify among themselves potential community benefits, and recommend resident members for the ad hoc committee discussed in the division. And there's mention of the applications as well, but there has to be time in this meeting for us to actually talk among ourselves. And right now we're just doing kind of the same now 5-minute question answer process with the developer. So I just think it would be unacceptable not to bring this up, and there needs to be a shift after some questions to actually make it so we can have a discussion. Because that was the whole point of this meeting. I understand that it's on Zoom, so it's a little bit different, but we still need to be able to talk about it, because the goal tonight really is not, we have to talk to the developer and learn more about this, but that's what the ad hoc committee is doing. That's not exactly what we're doing tonight. What we're doing tonight is learning a little bit about it, discussing what kind of public benefit we want among ourselves, and recommending people who might be good for this ad hoc committee. And then from those people that we think might be good, council, or really Lois Richardson, the mayor, she will be nominating and council will confirm. So I just want to uplift that. The other thing I want to uplift is that the public benefit that the developer is asking for is for 25 million over a 30-year period. So $25 million in tax benefit over the course of 30 years. And the very first sentence of the community benefits ordinance is that it shall be the policy of the city of Ipsy to require, wherever feasible, proportional community benefits as a condition of significant public support
or development in the form of subsidies, tax abatements, etc. So it has to be proportional. So I just, we don't have to, negotiate for crumbs here. It's a proportional community benefit to the public support being asked for, which is $25 million. So it is possible that if the developer is saying this is not feasible for them without that pilot, and they also can't renegotiate what the affordability is for the units or density or the split between the 40 and the 60, it might be that the committee recommends that this is not a project that they think the city should move forward with. That could be an outcome. So I just, that's another thing I want to uplift. And my questions are these. So one is for staff. When are we having the discussion? Is it going to be after this Q&A part? The second question is for the developer. What's the square footage for these units? And then I do also want to hearken or go back to what Desiree was talking about when she was mentioning our area median income here is $39,000. So at 100% of the AMI, based on affordability, 30% of your income, units would be $975 for 100%. At 80%, they would be $780. At 60%, they'd be $585. And at 40%, it'd be $390. So, it is a significant difference between calculating based on the county AMI and calculating based on Ypsilanti. And, the whole point of having these discussions and like trading something for a tax abatement or a pilot or things like that is that we can decide what we want as far as the standards. We don't have to go by the county standards. We can demand, whatever amount for the apartments. And if the developer can't do that or doesn't want to do that, that's it. And I think Desiree told me this, but I don't know if it came up in her comment, is just that the CBO specifies that in the tier 1 and the tier 2, I think it's tier 2, that we're advocating for low income housing or requiring low income housing, which doesn't necessarily mean affordability by the measures that MISHDA or the IRS is saying. It's not based on that. We're just asking for housing that's affordable to low income residents in Ypsilanti. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Kyle, do you want to answer the one question?
Square footage question?
Then I'll handle the rest.
Sure, just on the square footage question. For 1-bedroom units, they are approximately 700 square feet, 700 to 725 square feet. For 2 bedrooms, they're about 1,000 to 1,100 square feet. And for 3 bedrooms, they're 1,250 to 1,350 in square footage.
And then to answer your question about the community benefits meeting, Amber, so we're trying our best under the circumstances we have. I think we all would like to have these meetings in public. However, we are in a health crisis. And so if there is time at the end of the meeting, we're not going to shut everybody down and leave. There's definitely time for discussion at the end. But we wanted to make sure we could get through and make sure people's questions are answered by the developer at this point. And then as far as the low income housing, as it states in the ordinance, it's low or middle income housing. And so it does have a wide swath of latitude there. And I think as the person who did not draft that, I do believe it was meant to be a little more vague to allow for multiple different products, but I could be very wrong. So, if there's nothing else, we can move on to the next question. Or Amber, I mean, if you have any other questions.
No, I just hope we can get to a public discussion that's a little bit more free at some point. That's it. That's the purpose of this meeting.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Finn Bell. Finn, there you go.
Yeah, I'm actually Mary, the other person named. So just two questions for you, Kyle. Could you give us the names of some other developments in Michigan that Lincoln Avenue Capital has done? And then
Yep.
also, what is the property management arrangement after these developments are completed? Is it contracted out? Does Lincoln Avenue manage the properties? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The property management is contracted out. So we work with a handful of third-party property managers. And in Michigan, KMG Prestige is the name of a management company that we do a lot of work with. And actually, probably the best example of a somewhat comparable development that the company owns in the area is it's called Lakestone Apartments, and it's in Scioto Township, so it's not right there in Ypsilanti, but it's close on the other side of Ann Arbor. That's going to be the nearest development to this one for comparison's sake, and KMG does manage that one as well. So as far as like from an operational standpoint, that would be a similar property to look at, but that's a much older development. Oh. Joe, can you hear me?
I was muted. I'm sorry.
right.
With Finn turning off their camera, I apologize to Finn as well, because or whoever is speaking, I can only see that name. And so I do apologize. The next we have KCR. Casey, you are allowed to speak. Casey, you will be allowed to raise your hand again. But for time purposes, we will go to the next one. If I don't see you unmute in a minute. All right, next we will have George Hagenauer. George, you are able to speak.
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions. I mean, Amber, I think, answered, and Desiree answered some of the AMT questions. As a senior citizen on Social Security, the rents, if I became single and no longer at a house, do seem like they aren't real feasible within these ranges. I'm sort of curious, is the pilot payout based on occupied rental units or built rental units? Because that seems to be considerably, potentially a really big difference. Is they're talking about a buyout. Is that limited to the beginning of the process, or can that be done anytime during the 30 years? And how do these rents compare to like current rents in Ypsi? Because what I've seen, and granted I'm in the older part of the city and at the other end of the city, but I've seen a lot of empty rental units here and quite often at higher price ranges. So I'm just looking at sort of the economic feasibility. And finally, does the city do any type of cost benefit? I mean, granted, you're going to be getting more taxes than an empty piece of land, but you're also going to be adding 300 units of housing, which are going to be drawing on various forms of city services. Is there any type of analysis of what the cost might be versus what the potential tax income might be? Was that done at any period of time?
So as far as our pilot ordinances have been in the past, it's not occupied units, it's just number of units.
Okay.
And so that's how our existing pilots work. I don't understand your question about the buyout. They're really, from what I've gathered, and Kyle, please correct me, if a development decides there isn't really an option for a MISHDA affordable development to go unaffordable until the bond is paid off. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things, but we would be making, so on the affordability, there would be at least a 30-year commitment to keeping the property affordable. But I think the buyout that Mr. Hagenaar might be referring to is something that was discussed during the earlier presentation by the council member. I think there was a discussion of buying out of certain criteria for the pilot. So I think what that was, and that was something I learned that I wasn't aware of even existed in the pilot program. But I think that was, you could, if there is a criteria or a requirement that the development can't achieve, there's like a fee that we can pay to buy out of that. Wasn't described what the fee was. It wasn't described how that worked, but that's how I understood that, the buyout comment.
Yes, okay, that makes sense. That makes a whole lot more sense. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. So George, and then I guess the affordability piece, I think we've touched on it as well, but I don't know. Do you have any?
He had one more question about how it compares to rents within the city, and then talked about occupancies a little bit too, seeing vacant units. So what I can tell you, and I don't have a perfect inventory of all the apartments in Ypsilanti, the vacancy rate is very low. I think the city's vacancy rate is like 3% or something like that. It's quite low, as is the whole kind of MSA. The rents for, the older apartment housing stock rents are lower, but there are some newer apartments in the area that have rents that are actually much higher than what's being proposed here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, George. Next, we have Katie Greenwald. Or somebody else whose name is Brandon, I think.
It's Katie. Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. George touched on my first question, which was whether y'all had any idea as far as kind of market analysis of the need for this sort of thing in this area. That there are a lot of apartments right adjacent to this property, and my impression has been that those have a fairly high vacancy. So I was curious what the rents at those properties were versus what you're proposing. And then secondly, I wondered if you could speak a little bit to your, environmental sustainability sorts of initiatives. This is, as far as I'm aware, one of the largest and oldest continuously forested sites in the city of Ypsilanti. We know that, I guess I can't be on the CBO committee. I live in Superior Township, but I would really urge the committee to think about the fact that green spaces are actually a community benefit as well, in a lot of ways, right? There are a lot of ways that we know that forested areas, that trees are improving air quality, are improving capture and retention of water. We already have flooding issues downstream of this location. So I looked at the website, or your website, and you have a 1-page PDF on environmental sustainability, and it's like something about replacing some appliances in one complex to be more water efficient. So it was pretty underwhelming. So I guess I'm just, like I said, I urge the community to kind of think about the need for this. And I think there have been some awesome points brought up about affordability, the need for affordability for low-income housing. I very much support the CBO process. I think it's cool. But I also think there are other types of benefits that could come into consideration when you're looking at a location like this that is right adjacent to the Huron River and currently relatively intact habitat.
Thank you. Kyle, I don't know if you have anything about your sustainability features.
What I would say is so first of all, the apartments will have many energy efficient requirements or energy efficient, efficiency features. Through the MISHDA program, we are going to be complying with likely national green building standards. There's a variety of green building certifications that we're eligible for. I think it's going to be NGBS, although we haven't formally decided, but we will pick a green building kind of program to be certified into. You know, stormwater management, like I referenced earlier, is something that we're focused on for this site. I'm not saying that it's anything that's like drastically above and beyond what we need to do, but it will be an improvement. And we're also very interested in trying to preserve as many of the existing trees and sort of natural landscape as possible, while also fully acknowledging that development of housing sort of necessarily disrupts portions of natural habitat and ecology. So.
All right, thank you. Janice, you are allowed to speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much for Kyle for the presentation and the information provided. I did have a couple of questions. The 5% pilot that I'm trying to understand this. So you said that you all will be taking 5% of the income minus the utilities, correct? And that is what will be paid to the city. So what utilities would you be, why would the utilities be deducted? What utilities will you all be paying out? I guess I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, the utility portion, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's just that's the formula that's used to determine this payment in lieu of taxes. And so essentially it's what rent is received less what the apartments, and in this case, I think of it as the basically the common utilities for the building. For whatever reason, that's what this calculation is. It's rents received less the utilities paid out, utility expenses. That number, 5% of that is the pilot payment. It's not a huge, utilities aren't a huge number in comparison to rent. You know, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's a fraction of the rents. So it's really just the pilot ordinance, I believe, says that it's shelter rents are what the pilot percentage is based on. And the definition of shelter rents is, you know, rents received minus utilities.
And what other amenities or utilities would the tenants be responsible for? The reason why I'm asking is we keep having this conversation about affordable and low income. And I'm just trying to understand a client that could go into this particular home. Would that also include someone on Section 8? Because I know the city has an ordinance that state that you cannot discriminate based upon a source of income. So
we could take Section 8 voucher.
Okay.
Yes, we could.
All right. And so with the so with the utilities that they would be required to pay, that amount is in a formula that deducts how much assistance they would actually get. So I would want to understand like how those numbers really work out, and if this would in fact still be affordable for somebody on a voucher program. And then my last question, I believe I did want to also make a comment in regards to the myth that there is a ton of properties out there right now that are vacant. That is not accurate. It might be even less than 3% occupancy, even for apartments and properties that are owned, single family homes or condos that are rentals as well. And with those rates that are currently out there, I'm looking at a property right now that's 1,100 square feet, and the rent for that is 1,600. And then there's one even on Lavona Street for an 1,100 square foot home. They want $2,300 a month. So I think we need to really, when we're looking at some things, there is not a lot of homes or affordable housing out there, low income housing. And we have a large amount of our population that are on Section 8 that are unfortunately getting forced out of the community because there's nowhere for them to rent. So when people start to discuss those things, I need you all to keep that in mind as well. But if you can answer those questions for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So only, so the first question was if we would accept Section 8 voucher holders, and we will. The second question, I'm not quite sure if it was a question about what a Section 8 voucher holder would be required to pay versus somebody who doesn't have Section 8. And if that's the question, I don't, without knowing the terms of their voucher, I wouldn't know exactly what they would be required to pay. But typically, a Section 8 voucher holder has a maximum amount that they can pay based on their income. And so that's, they would only be able to, or only be required to pay whatever that was based on their voucher. It wouldn't, their rental rate would not be, they wouldn't be responsible for more than their voucher because our rents could be higher than their voucher, if that makes sense.
Can I ask actually a follow-up on that? Just because I think there's some confusion here. Will utilities be included in these units?
Some will, some will not. We have to provide a utility allowance. So if for whatever utilities are not included in the rent, we have to further reduce our rents so that residents don't pay more.
Okay, so when we're talking about the pilot, everyone on the call, the reason why we back out the utilities is only to calculate shelter rent for the city's pilot. It has nothing to do with the developer and what will be provided. So I hope that makes sense. The backing out utility is only calculated for the pilot, nothing else. And then, sorry, Kyle, but I think there was another follow-up to that as well. Or third question.
I'm sorry, I just had the, if I missed one, I do apologize. I only had the Section 8 if we'd accept vouchers, and then basically if the Section 8 voucher holder would have to pay more for utilities.
And I saw Janice put a thumb up, so.
Okay.
Next, we're gonna go to Brian Jones-Chance because he has not spoken yet, and then Desiree, we will get to you. So Brian, I'll mute you right now.
Hey, thanks. Sorry, I lost my video here. Yeah, so in addition to being on council, and I am a commercial and multifamily real estate broker, primarily dealing in commercial and multifamily, that is. I think what you're going to hear is a lot of concerns around affordability, and actually my first glance at the project, I was a little concerned that these weren't affordable. And in fact, like a lot of communities that are adjacent to affluent communities, our AMI is going to be less. We have another issue, which is that the adjacent affluent community to us also has a larger population, and then there are several smaller populations around it, which are even more affluent than that. So, as much as I would like to see something worked out here as far as community benefits, it just may be that with construction costs where they are, this may not be the time for new construction that is affordable for people in Ypsilanti to be built. And I think someone else mentioned it, but that is a possible outcome of this process. And, that's okay. So I do have a question, because part of, Janice and I are in the same business. And what you're saying about the pricing of units now is absolutely true. And I think you mentioned it before that there are places that are more expensive. However, there are recently renovated units in Arbor 1, which is next to this site, that are very close in price and very close in square footage. And those are market rate. So to my eye at the moment, I'm not seeing a lot of additional benefit or affordability beyond what a market rate project would provide. And it just may be that, times are changing a little bit and we won't see a market rate project anyway. The biggest, I don't know that I would call it a benefit, but I think the biggest the thing that impresses me most, I think, about the project is that you were able to acquire the site. And so I don't know the difficulty of that, but I'm not sure that that's good for the for the benefits process. So I do have a question. So based on your underwriting to this point, what is, what's a ballpark of your approximate funding gap?
So with the 5% pilot and the low income housing tax credits, we don't have a funding gap. It's a sliding scale from there. And, so if it's a 6% pilot, then it's a number. I don't have my numbers in front of me, but it slides from there. And, and if it's a 6% pilot and we lower the affordability, it just gets bigger. So there's the best way of describing it is it's a sliding scale, and there's a whole host of variable developments that we could look at or propose. But the development in front of you tonight, with the unit mix and the affordabilities as proposed, the amenities as proposed, all that works with a 5% pilot. And if you start to reduce the pilot, make it a higher percentage, then it starts
I understand that. I guess I'm more curious about what is the funding gap before the pilot. I mean, or are you just zeroing out here?
With no pilot, you mean? Well, with no pilot at all, the funding gap is millions and millions of dollars. I don't know. I don't know how many millions of dollars with no pilot, because as somebody indicated earlier, the annual difference between what would be considered the market rate property taxes and the pilot is substantial. It's $800,000 of tax reduction. That would lead me to say something, kind of build on something you said earlier, which is theoretically that's like what a market rate development would pay. The rents you would have to charge to make that work would be so astronomical that it isn't feasible. Even a market rate development without pilot, I don't think is feasible.
Right.
Right. So, it's a multi-million-dollar funding gap. And by that, I mean from day one. There's also sort of a confusion here or it's a difficult kind of moving metric, because the pilot has been described as this number over 30 years. What we really have to solve for is, what does that 30-year number result in today? Because you have to do you have to look at the present value of that 30-year benefit.
Yeah.
And so, without having the math in front of me, I would say that it's probably at least a 12 to 14, probably a 10 to $14 million gap that you would have if you had no pilot in your financing. Something in that ballpark.
I guess that would depend on the discount rate, but sure. Another concern I have is, we're not afraid of density here. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the site plan. I don't know about the engineering. I don't know about the possibility of increasing units by building up. So I guess I'll just leave that alone, but to the extent that it would help, it might be good to explore that during the process. Another concern I had was KMG, and just for the record, I don't manage any property in the city, but there are some newer affordable developments that the residents who live in those that are managed by KMG. A lot of those are in my ward, and I would say I don't think the residents really think of them highly at the moment. There are a lot of recent issues, so that's a bit of a concern for me. And then the commitment for the I think someone brought up the 30 years. We had a similar issue, I think, with a LIHTC deal that took place at at a senior apartment complex. And, you know, I think the community understood that they would remain throughout the course of the 15-year period, you know, but then they ducked out early. So you might expect that the community will ask for a commitment for the entirety of the period. And I think that's good to know upfront. I do think all the affordability comments, though, are valid. You know, we're kind of, I wouldn't even say a unique situation. Like I said, there are a lot of less affluent cities in affluent counties that experience this same issue. And, you know, this just may not be the year or 2 or 3 or 5 for new construction of affordable units in places like us. And I think I'll leave my comments there.
Right.
Thank you.
Casey, I see you're back. So Casey, I will allow you to speak. Casey, are you there? All right, so I don't see Casey going. I will unmute John. And Casey, if you can try to unmute at some point, please do, although please wait for John to finish speaking. There you go, John. John, please speak, John, because I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else can.
I saw him drop. I wonder if he accidentally got dropped.
No, he's on there.
Oh, okay.
John, you might want to try to log out and log back on because something is going on with you at the moment. So Casey, I'll ask you again. We'll go to Beth.
I just wanted to go back to a comment that Amber made earlier about a key important part of this meeting was for the community to be able to talk to figure out what kind of benefits the community wants. And I think a lot of these questions have been really important. I think we found out some good information here, but I'm concerned that we're not having that time for the community to think about what are the benefits we want out of this kind of project.
So Beth, I would say that the goal right now is to have anyone on the committee ask the developer any questions they have. After that, when we kind of go into next steps, we can definitely have that discussion. But this is the one time before we actually get into the committee where anyone on this board can actually ask any questions. So I understand what you're saying, and we will get to that. However, I do want to make sure everyone has had their chance to ask the developer or staff direct questions before we open it up to everyone. So that will be coming very, very, very soon, depending on the question. So was that your main question, Beth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Desiree?
Hi. I'll just say, I know Rod was saying that he's having a hard time unmuting, so. But I just wanted to say a couple of things. So I know y'all talked about the LIHTC, and I know there was that question about the loopholes, and I know, like, I feel like I keep hearing it over and over that the loopholes were closed after Cross Street Village, but I just want to, like, have some confirmation about that, and also just to ask Kyle if you know about, like, that issue that there was around LIHTC, if you understand concern where there was like a 30-year affordability, but then there was like a 15-year kind of loophole that was built in. And so I just want to see if you understand that that was an issue, and then to see if there's confirmation. I don't know, Joe, if you have confirmation about that, in terms of what that looks like. And then also around thinking about the size. I mean, those are some pretty good size apartments. My house is 1150 square feet. And so I'm trying to like imagine that. And then I'm just trying to imagine like if the spaces can be smaller. And I know y'all are crunching numbers and things like that. But anyway, that also just makes me think again that I'm thinking about the homes in the city of Ypsilanti, even like the single family homes. A lot of them are much smaller than the size that you're talking about for these apartments. I mean, at least in my neighborhood, my house is kind of, it's on the smallish medium size, I guess. But anyways, I'm just naming that again, like, because I think as we think about the area here, and who's here and who would be looking to move into these beautiful accommodations. So there might be some of that sizing. That's just another kind of thing in terms of thinking about the market. And I think I was just thinking about when people were talking about the vacant, some of these different spaces, whether it's not so much that they're vacant. Well, I mean, I can't say whether they're vacant or not, but maybe there's some of the spaces that's being held around for like Airbnb or people who are like part-time or seasonal occupants or things like that. Because that's something that I also see within a lot more like luxury spaces, is that's a use that that we see happen, in part because they need to rent out their own space to afford it anyhow. So yeah, I think I just wanted to say that about the space, but yeah, in terms of the loophole piece. Thanks.
Yeah. So the loophole, I'm familiar with what happened with Cross Street. I'm not super familiar on the exact loophole that they used to somehow, it sounds like, get out of a 30-year commitment after 15 years. It used to be a long time ago that the affordable housing requirements just were 15 years. And after 15 years, there was a way to get out. If they had a 30-year restriction, that's the part that I didn't understand in the process. But what I can tell you now is that MISHDA, for example, 30 years is the minimum affordability length. Now you can't, there isn't a loophole. There's not a way to get out. They in fact make you basically sign a certification. Not basically, they make you sign a certification when you apply for your tax credits that says, we acknowledge there's no 15-year opt-out. There's no way to get out after 15 years. And we're committing to, whatever you commit to in your application, a minimum of 30 years, it could be longer. That's at the state level. I think that Joe would tell you, though I'll let him fill this in. I think, with a pilot agreement, there would be another restriction or another confirmation of that at the city level, that if, the owner pulled out of the agreement early, which I don't think is even possible, but if they did, they would lose the pilot. And then as an organization, what we develop and own is affordable housing. And so we may develop something now that has a 30-year affordability restriction, but high chances are that we will own it for longer than that. And we'll come back in and renovate it and keep it affordable beyond those 30 years. Typically after, 30 years, or even sometimes 15 years, you need to reinvest in pretty significant capital ways to upkeep apartments. So we do that and then keep them affordable. So that is our business. So I hope that helps. And then your question on square footages, I gave you some average square footages earlier. The 700 square feet for a one bedroom. Our one bedrooms will range across the site, that some of them will be more like 675, some will be 725, but on average they're about 700. And then the same thing with the kind of 1,000-ish square foot 2-bedroom up to 12 or 1,300 square foot 3-bedroom. Those we have a fair number of requirements from the state agency again in unit sizing and how big certain rooms can be. So you can only make affordable units so small and still meet those requirements. So there might be a little bit of room to bring the size down, but it's not going to be super substantial, I don't think, and still be able to meet their requirements.
Oh, Desiree, here, I'll let you unmute. I just before, just to add in, from what I was told about the Cross Street Village deal, Kyle pretty much got it right. During the early 2000s, there was a 2-year period where MISTA hadn't closed the loophole in their agreements, where even though it was a 30-year agreement, there was an opt-out at 15. MISTA realized that in, I think, 2002 and started closing all of those loopholes. So no development after 2002 could actually take advantage of that. And so we will definitely work with our lawyers. If this project goes through, we will work with our lawyers to make sure that is the case. And reviewing before any pilot agreement is signed. We also work with MISTA to make sure that that can't happen again. And so we don't ever want that to happen again. That was terrible, and really put a huge damper on the city.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I, just was able to confirm. So it was a 99-year agreement for the Cross Street Village, and then they opted out. So it was even longer time. And so the one thing I just wanted to just say to our question is, so like with thinking about the size, it was just making me think about like, if the individual spaces are smaller, that might be able to impact the affordability, like, so the amount. So is that like the square footage kind of add into like the pricing, and like, so if it was a smaller square footage, how much could that impact than what the individual space would cost?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, for the way that affordability restrictions on units work, they don't rent per square foot, they rent based on the bedroom count. So if you have a 2-bedroom unit, it rents for X. You can't say I have like a small 2-bedroom unit, so it's going to rent for less, or I have a big 2-bedroom unit, so it's going to rent for more. It's a bedroom based rent structure. And then with those specific room requirements, like I mentioned earlier, what ends up happening is the unit sizes gravitate kind of close to the minimums because they're pretty good, they're pretty large minimums. So that's how those unit sizes get developed.
So Casey, I don't know what else to do. I've asked you to unmute. I've also made you a co-host, so you should be able to unmute yourself. I'm very sorry, Casey. I don't know what to do. But I will continue, keep trying to unmute yourself.
Maybe log on and log back in would be the only other thing. I thought we did. Oh, okay. I thought we heard Casey at the beginning for some reason.
So we'll go to Annie.
All right, hello again. So I'm looking at the community benefits ordinance, the language. I guess I'd like some clarification. The purpose of this meeting. So I guess in the first section that describes the procedures for this development, am I understanding that there should be no less than 30 days advance notice of the first meeting where the community would have a chance to discuss the potential community benefits? Because that's what I'm looking at right now. And I guess, did we have 30 days notice? And it's 9/11 and this started at 7 and there hasn't been community discussion yet.
Yeah, so there was 30-day notice. And we are working on it. Andy, do you have
I'm
anything?
just bringing it up because I think if we made an error, that we should just plan on having another meeting dedicated to what it's supposed to be, which I think it's supposed to be dedicated to inform the community about the project and to allow the community to discuss potential community benefits. And I totally like appreciate all the questions and answers, but I do want to just acknowledge that I think that this process might be wrong.
So I think at this point, there are people with their hands up, and if they have questions and they're not significantly different from the questions that have already been asked, you know, if there's a root difference in those things, then we can entertain that question, or they could be submitted directly to the to Joe or me, and we can get that answer to the people. But you're right, there's no time limit on this meeting, and this is you know, in the ordinance, this is a tall order for a single meeting, and I agree. So, you know, if there's not any significant differences to these questions, we should just go ahead and get the discussion going, and that can happen at any time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a good idea just because like I have to leave actually right now. So I wish I could stay for the actual discussion, but I just hope that happens for the people who showed up and stayed on.
And this is also being recorded and it will be put on our website, just so everyone knows. There are two people who have not spoken yet. And so we'll go to John and then the mayor, and then we will go to community discussion right after that. So John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Lusk. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Logging out and logging back in helped. A curious question about mechanics. I was under the impression we were going to get mailed notice since we're a neighbor, and we didn't. I only found out through the grapevine. So I wondered, is that normal? Shouldn't I have received? I thought the ordinances called for me to be notified by mail of this kind of thing. Not true. I see Steve wagging his head there. So
I didn't see anywhere in the ordinance that it specified how the notification was going to happen.
Well, there was no official notification made. So, okay, mail, but anyways, just hope that in the future when things happen, especially since it's my next door neighbor, I'd be notified. And here again, you know, we've lived here over 30 years, and there's been maybe 3 other attempts to build on this property. And during those times, I researched the various things. And one of them was the fact that Ypsilanti at that time was #2 in the state with the lowest owner occupied dwellings. It's a problem for the city. I mean, rental people typically don't carry the same interest, the same involvement that the owners do. And when you get very, very low, I think Flint was the worst. So right there, that's a warning shot across the bow. This is another rental property, be it a full market value or not. Ypsilanti desperately needs owner occupied things, but so be it. So that's my comment, and you can turn me off now.
Mayor?
Yes, John, I certainly agree with you that Ypsilanti needs owner occupied housing. We are over we are over the top on rental properties. But right now, Joe, I did send you a text. I don't know if you saw it, to say that we definitely need to move to discussion because of the time. It's well after 9, and some people that came on thinking this was to be a discussion amongst the community might really need to leave. So if we could move on to discussion, and maybe the people that still have questions for the developer could send those texts, forward their questions to you and the staff, and the developer could answer through you, and we get those answers out to them. So,
Now,
thank you.
We have now gotten to the point in the meeting where I believe I asked everyone to unmute. So now this will be the citizen-led part of the discussion.
Just because it came up, the
You stop sharing your screen? Yes.
I just wanted to bring up, because the noticing issue came up, and it is in the ordinance that there is a noticing procedure. So under section 3530, it states that such notice shall be sent by mail or personal delivery to all registered groups, the developer, to all persons to whom real property is assessed within 1,000 feet of the property boundary of where the project is located, and to the occupants of the structures within 1,000 feet of where the project is located. So
Thank you,
that
Amber.
noticing should have happened. If it hasn't, then we probably should plan for another meeting because the procedure wasn't done correctly.
One thing I would wonder, just in terms of like whether it's specific, it would probably be 1,000 feet within the city. Probably. So I don't know, John, whether you're in the city or Superior Township, but I know some folks have been saying that they're in Superior Township. So I just wanted to probably clarify that.
Well, my taxes say that I'm in the city. I pay over 10,000 a year in taxes.
So I guess, did staff send those notices within 1,000 feet? Maybe they'll clarify it. Can anyone on council or staff verify whether or not notices were sent out to people living within 1,000 feet of the proposal?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that. Joe, you're muted.
Joe stepped away for a moment. Notices were not sent out by mail within 1,000 feet.
Great.
Given that and given the lateness of the time, is it possible to have a second meeting where the discussion of what benefits the community would like can be figured out?
I definitely think so. This is going to, we've adjusted the timeline that I gave in the thing has been adjusted longer than that as well. The question is when we do that, we can get information here in terms of when that would be appropriate. Do you guys want to do that before the end of the year or do that in the first thing of January? If that needs to be noticed 30 days, that puts us out quite a bit. And so we'd have to take that into account. So if we got that notice out immediately tomorrow or early next week, that would put us to close to the end of January or mid-January before that meeting could happen. But you're right. If we haven't complied with the ordinance ourselves, then we need to adjust that so that other people can participate in that.
Rules
and
are
John,
rules.
Yeah, I think it's just a learning curve. So I don't think, obviously we're learning things from this meeting and everything, but
sure.
I do want to advocate that. I think a lot of maybe the misunderstandings or the noticing issues could have been avoided if there was just a little bit more collaboration between staff and the coalition group Ready, and I don't know, I haven't been involved with Ready, so I don't know if there has been any communication, but I think for the next meeting, that would be helpful to avoid this kind of situation.
Yep.
Can I just, I know I'm like talking a lot, y'all, but I just wanted to say, because to that point, one of the questions was thinking about like different group, what is it? Something groups or whatever, but like groups that would registered groups. Thank you. And so, yeah, I was thinking about like how a group would register. And I know that was partially, like I would totally say that Ready would register because we wanted to make sure that we knew about things in enough time to be able to help support this process. When we went through this whole process in 2018, we specifically, we were like, this is not, we want to be helpful. We want it to be successful. And so we wanted to help make sure that this public process piece would be able to go as smoothly as possible. And so that was one of the reasons that we wanted to have that registered groups piece in there, but it's not clear exactly how that happens. And I know I didn't find out the date. I found out about this from MLive, and that was because somebody else sent it to me. To even tell me that the date was set. Like I knew that there was a proposed project, but I didn't know the date of the meeting. And so, yeah, anyway, so I think I just wanted to like name that and say that, I think as you can tell, there's a lot of us from Ready who are on this call because we are so committed to this process and the success of it. And so, that's why, anyway, so I just wanted to say that, we want this to be successful and, yeah, anyway.
I'd like to suggest that when you do the notice, which you have to do now legally, that one, you do a link to the recording of this because both Kyle and Joe laid out a large amount of information. And what you don't want to do is to have a meeting where everybody has to ask the same questions. It'll take you exactly as long. So having links is sort of key stuff on that. The other thing, and I'm not totally sure on because I'm coming into this as a community member who hasn't gone through this whole process and hasn't seen a lot of this stuff, is do the people who show up at this meeting then vote for those 3 members? Or is it just determining what the needed community benefits are? So I think what'd be really good is as the notice goes out that you have both the presentation Joe had or the entire recording, so that the people are all prepared, but also people really need to know exactly what's going to, is what it's looking at are the benefits, or is it looking at the benefits and selecting those 3 representatives?
The wording in the ordinance is kind of ambiguous, and it says that 3 of the selected members will be from the recommendations of this meeting.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that this meeting could recommend 20 people and council gets to narrow that down to 3, or whether this meeting narrows it down to 3. I don't think that is stipulated in the ordinance. It just says 3 people recommended at this meeting. So if this comes up with a list of, say, 7 or 8 possibilities and this group wants to narrow it down to 3 and say that's it, then that's one thing. But I think it's up to this group whether they recommend more people and have that go to council as 8 people recommended.
My impression from being a part of that process and this being made is that, and like I agree with you, Steve, it makes it a little bit ambiguous in the ordinance, so it's up to interpretation. But that this meeting or the meeting 30 days from now, we can make as many or as few recommendations to council, because I think you're appointing 5 to 8 members of the public. So at minimum, you have to select 3, but you could select more from the recommendations of the meeting. And that's why I was like, we need to get to the talking about people that are potentially interested so we can maybe even see who's in the pool and do that. So yeah, I think that will be important.
So it seems like because of the language in the ordinance, we need to have another meeting. Do people want to spend time right now? It's 9:25. It's been 2 hours and 25 minutes of this. Having any conversation about those people or just putting names out there. So at least if they're not here and they're not within the general vicinity of this development, that they can be contacted to attend the next meeting.
Personally, I would think that should be done at the next meeting. Since we're going to have that other meeting to follow what was in the ordinance, to follow that and to follow the process correctly. I think it should be, those names should come out of that meeting where there is that discussion.
It'll also
Although
be,
I was just
in
gonna
person,
ask,
probably.
yeah, and I was just gonna ask about the fact that folks that came to this meeting thinking that this was doing all of those things though, and if, you know, because if the next meeting doesn't work, does that mean that people couldn't be part of that selection, right? I kind of, I don't know how we want to deal with that, but I could imagine that the next meeting could be set at a time that the people who came today couldn't go, but might be interested in participating in that way.
If anyone wants to state now that they are interested in being on the ad hoc committee, I'm happy to write down your name and like nominate you at the next meeting to solve that.
It seems fair that a roster from both this meeting and the next meeting be used to make a selection, to me anyway.
I agree. I think a roster from both meetings makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, so is somebody from the city going to keep that roster then?
Well, I see one hand being raised at the moment, and so I have written that name down. Yeah.
No. Is somebody taking a roster of all the names of the people that were at this meeting? Is what
Oh,
I
yeah.
think Brian is asking.
Oh, yeah, no, so we have that.
Okay, I think that's what he was asking.
Yeah, some
Correct,
folks might want to
Brian?
apply, but maybe
Right.
haven't decided just yet.
Yes.
And
So-
my last name's not on my tag, so you can write me down as Lusk, John Lusk, please. Thank you.
The one name maybe I can try and find it. I don't have the person with Ben Bell. I have Mary Garb, but I don't know what the last name is.
Garboden, Garboden.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, and just for clarity, is this saying that the roster from the attendees at the meeting, that if they're nominated at the next meeting, so like if we might, like well, let me back up. I would like to be considered, so I'll put myself on. Is that the roster? Like, do we have to name that we would like to be considered for the ad hoc group?
I feel like anyone should be, since we put the link out there, it seems like anyone who was here at any point during this meeting should be allowed to apply, and maybe we should move that deadline because we had it at midnight tonight. Maybe that should be midnight following the next /real meeting.
Right.
And anyone who was here tonight in good faith should be able to, I think, apply at that time.
Thank
And
you,
we
that
should-
makes
we
sense.
should know
Can you just
everyone
post
who
it
was here.
again? Because I missed it when it was up on the screen, actually.
So it's cityofypsilanti.com/CBO. I'll share my screen again, but then you don't get to see everyone. So I'll do it for a minute, not to hide it, but just so everyone can see everyone's face.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of, there's two different interpretations of how the community selects the community members for the ad hoc committee. And it seems like there's this application process, which is one way, but then, you know, in the ordinance, it's really saying that, you know, we're going to, at the meeting, select some people too. So I think that needs to be clarified, whether or not the mayor and city council are going to look at all the people that are applying through this link, or they're going to maybe give more, I guess, interest to the recommendations that are made at the next meeting, which includes naming people that are not attending, because in the ordinance it says that, you know, we can make recommendations of people that are not there. So yeah, I understand, like, for accessibility reasons, having a link so anyone that's interested can apply is great, but if we're going by the CBO language, I think that next meeting is really the important time when we kind of decide however many or few people we're recommending.
Right, so I see that next meeting is the two different things, right? The recommendations of the people for the committee and the consideration and listing of benefits that people come up with to then be put forward to the committee. It's the committee has to come up with this as well, but those benefits should be listed as well. And they're not confined to what's on the list as well, because since there is the possibility that there can be substitutions for those benefits, then people need to be thinking creatively about what they think those benefits would be. And some really great points were brought up in even in the question and answer in terms of the proportionality of this, and that should be considered in those benefits as well. So at this point, we've got another meeting that needs to be noticed. There needs to be direct mailings going out to the people adjacent to the location. So we'll get that scheduled as soon as possible. There's a lot of meetings going on in January for the city, so that will be an interesting scheduling. I want to thank people who are willing to be on that committee, and for all the comments. As I said, this is the maiden voyage, and there's a lot of ambiguity in the CBO. And with that, we need to get that scheduled. I think at this point, we've got the roster from people here. We've got two people, John and Desiree, have put their name in to be on that. There's an electronic application that anybody from this meeting is welcome to fill out, and we can do that. And then we can get the word out to have more people at the next meeting that maybe couldn't make it to this meeting. So is there anything else that people want to discuss at this point?
I can say that the next meeting will be in person, and so we will have to find a location for that. We'll be, I'm assuming, masked and socially distanced to the best ability we can. The state is no longer allowing us to have virtual meetings, which just makes the safety a larger concern.
So the city council meetings and other meetings will be hybrids going after the first of the year. So the particular bodies have to be in place, but residents and staff can attend virtually. So I think we need to accommodate that for this meeting as well, so people can show up in person if they want, and also Zoom in if they don't or can't make it in person. So
I just, please bear with us on that. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road as we're all trying this new hybrid, and I do apologize for any of the miscommunication or misnoticing. It was never an intentional thing. We're all learning all of these new processes, and so please understand none of that was ever intentional, and we will make it right. So.
All right. If there's nothing else, let's adjourn this meeting and people can go about their business, and we'll get another date on the calendar for the next meeting. And thank you all for your input. I know a lot of you folks were intimately involved in creating this ordinance, and thank you for your knowledge and your experience. So I look forward to meeting with you guys in January.
Thanks
Good night,
everyone
everyone.
for your time and presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody,
good,
for your interest
everyone
as
have a
well.
good night and happy holidays.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.